The History of the Sinclair Spectrum, Chapter 1. Chapter 1, The Birth of the Spectrum. If you'd like to imagine a quieter time, let your mind drift back to early 1980, a Britain wrapped in soft grey mornings, slow radio voices, and the gentle whir of electric heaters beneath office desks. Personal computers were still rare and slightly intimidating, often locked behind institutional doors or found only in university labs. They felt more like specialized instruments than something an ordinary household might ever need. Yet, in Cambridge, a city with old stone buildings and peaceful courtyards, Sir Clive Sinclair was quietly shaping a different vision. He believed that computing, one day, should sit in the living room as casually as the television or the toaster. His company, Sinclair Research, had been experimenting with miniature TVs, calculators, and early electronics, all guided by a commitment to affordability and simplicity. Did you know? Sinclair Research originally specialized in small consumer gadgets because Sir Clive was convinced people would trust new technology more if it felt accessible and inexpensive. This mindset later influenced every design choice of the Spectrum. Inside the company's modest offices, engineers worked late into the night under soft fluorescent light, sketching ideas that would eventually form a new kind of machine. This new device wouldn't be large or heavy, like the business computers of the time. It would be small, tidy, and unintimidating, something that could sit comfortably beside a stack of magazines. When the Sinclair ZX Spectrum finally appeared in 1982, its design surprised many. Instead of a bulky case, it arrived in a low-profile black shell with a diagonal rainbow motif, just a narrow splash of color, almost shy, hinting that this machine was more playful than its predecessors. The casing felt smooth and lightweight, and at only a few hundred grams, it could be picked up with one hand like a paperback book. Did you know, the Spectrum was deliberately styled to look elegant on a living room table, which was unusual at the time. Many home computers then resembled industrial equipment, but Sinclair wanted something visually friendly. Of course, its most memorable feature, and the subject of countless discussions, was the rubber keyboard. Each key felt soft and slightly yielding, with printed labels for basic commands such as print and plot. For many newcomers, this meant their very first programming lessons felt a little less daunting. Instead of having to memorize long commands, the Spectrum offered visual cues printed directly on the keys. Did you know, the rubber keyboard was chosen partly because it reduced manufacturing costs and partly because Sinclair believed it would encourage beginners to experiment without feeling they might damage something fragile? Inside the machine, the engineering was remarkably compact. A Zilog Z80A processor, running at 3.5 MHz, formed the heart of the system. Though modest in power, the chip was efficient, dependable, and ideal for a machine built to inspire creativity across all age groups. Whether a child typed a simple command or a hobbyist loaded a detailed program, everything passed through that tiny processor humming away in its plastic shell. Did you know, the Spectrum's circuit board was designed to minimize components, reducing both cost and heat generation? This made the computer surprisingly reliable for something so small and lightweight. Then there was the matter of color. Many early home computers offered limited palettes, some only displayed text in a single color, and others showed graphics with harsh flicker or dull tones. The Spectrum, however, arrived with a selection of bright, cheerful colors that sprang to life on ordinary televisions. Even something as simple as printing a blue hello on the screen felt exciting to users encountering color computing for the first time. Did you know, the Spectrum's color output, though innovative, relied on a simplified system that grouped colors into blocks? This later produced the famous attribute clash, a visual quirk that became one of the machine's most recognizable traits. Perhaps one of the most unusual aspects of the Spectrum wasn't the computer itself but the way programs were loaded. Rather than using cartridges or floppy disks, owners relied on standard audio cassettes, the same format used for music albums. A user would place a tape into a recorder, press play, and wait while a pattern of distinctive screeches and whistles filled the room. These strange sounds represented digital information being translated into the machine's memory. Some families found the noise unpleasant. Others found it strangely soothing, like a robotic bird singing a mechanical lullaby. And once loading was complete, the screen would often burst into color as the program began. Did you know, the Spectrum's loading sounds were so iconic that some musicians later sampled them in electronic music tracks, treating them as nostalgic audio textures? By offering a full home computer for far less than the price of competing machines, Sinclair Research made computing attainable for thousands of households who had previously considered such technology far beyond their budget. Did you know, some retailers struggled to keep Spectrum units in stock during the first year of release because demand exceeded even Sinclair's optimistic projections? And so, with its affordable price, colorful display, compact size, and strangely charming keyboard, the Spectrum entered British homes quietly but decisively. It didn't arrive with fanfare or flashing lights. It simply sat on coffee tables, humming gently beside the TV, waiting with a small blinking cursor for someone, young or old, to type their very first command. The story of the Spectrum had only just begun. Chapter 2. The Spectrum arrives in homes. As the Sinclair ZX Spectrum began appearing on shop shelves across Britain, something subtle but meaningful started happening in households up and down the country. Families who had never owned a computer before found themselves bringing home a small cardboard box containing a black plastic machine that seemed almost impossibly light for what it promised to do. Some families carried it home on the bus, tucked under an arm. Others wrapped it carefully for birthdays, placing it beneath the soft glow of living room lamps, ready to be unboxed with curiosity. When the Spectrum was first connected to a television, a familiar household object, there was often a small moment of hesitation. People were used to TVs displaying scheduled programs, news, or children's shows, not flickering command prompts waiting for input. Yet the Spectrum treated the television not as entertainment but as a gateway to creativity, turning the living room into something quietly futuristic. Did you know, many early Spectrum users first learned computing concepts simply because the machine booted straight into a programming environment, encouraging experimentation from the moment it turned on? The two models available at launch, the 16K and 48K versions, introduced consumers to a new concept, memory size. Parents stood in electronic shops, trying to understand whether their children needed the more expensive 48K model or whether the 16K machine would be enough. Retailers explained, with patient voices, that more memory meant more detailed games, larger programs, and greater possibilities. Did you know, a significant number of early Spectrum games were written to detect both memory configurations automatically, offering enhanced features if 48K was present? In many homes, setting up the Spectrum became a small ritual. The power supply, slightly warm to the touch, plugged into the back. The aerial cable twisted into the television socket. And then the delicate adjuster on the TV, sometimes labeled tuning, was slowly rotated until the unmistakable blue border and white central area appeared. A blinking K symbol quietly awaited instructions. For many children, this moment was unforgettable. The cursor blinked at them as if inviting a conversation, urging them to try typing something, anything. Even typing the single word print followed by a phrase could make text appear on the television, as if the machine were listening carefully and responding politely. Did you know, many first-time users experienced a moment of surprise when the Spectrum displayed bright colors on a TV, because most had never realized that televisions were capable of generating computer graphics? Once connected and functional, the next step was loading software. The combination of a tape recorder, the computer, and a bundle of cassette tapes soon became a familiar sight. Parents often had to remind children not to touch the recorder during loading, because even a slight nudge could interrupt the process and force a restart. The loading tones, from gentle whistles to sharp electronic screeches, filled bedrooms and living rooms, becoming a background soundtrack of the era. Did you know, cassette loading times could vary widely, from under a minute to nearly 10 minutes, depending on the game and the recording quality? Sometimes the loading process would fail. The computer might display an error, or the screen flicker in disappointment. But children became experts in patience, adjusting tape volume levels, rewinding carefully, trying again, and learning, slowly, quietly, to troubleshoot problems long before they ever encountered formal instruction. The effect on imagination was immediate. Once a game successfully loaded, the Spectrum would transport players into colorful worlds made of pixels, simple shapes, and cheerful sound beeps. These early games felt magical, not because of graphical realism, but because of the novelty of controlling something on a screen. A small character responding to a button press was a minor miracle to someone who had never touched a computer before. Did you know, many early Spectrum games were only a few kilobytes in size, smaller than a modern email, yet they managed to feel rich and engaging to players of the time? In households where several siblings shared one Spectrum, evenings were often organized around turns. Someone would choose a cassette, load it, wait patiently, and then play for their allotted time before someone else eagerly took over. Arguments broke out, of course, as they always do in homes, but the machine itself remained a quiet and impartial companion. While games drew many users in, basic programming soon became a gentle pastime as well. People began typing in code printed in magazines, copying each line with careful attention. Every typo was a small puzzle, every successful run a small victory. Families often gathered around to see the final result, perhaps a bouncing ball, a simple calculator, or a colorful pattern filling the television screen. Did you know, some children wrote their first ever program on a Spectrum by copying a 5-line listing from a magazine, not realizing that this tiny moment would later influence their entire career paths? By the mid-1980s, the Spectrum had settled into British homes so quietly that it became part of the domestic landscape. It sat under the TV, beside coasters and remote controls, or on desks between stacks of schoolbooks. Its slight hum and warm power supply became familiar details, comforting in their predictability. The Spectrum didn't simply introduce people to computing. It invited them, gently and patiently, to explore new ideas at their own pace. Every key press, every tape loaded, every experiment gone wrong or right, these were the early steps of a generation learning digital thinking long before computers became commonplace. And in living rooms all across the country, the little black machine with its rainbow stripe waited quietly, ready for the next curious mind to press a key. Chapter 3. The Rise of the Bedroom Coder. As the Sinclair Spectrum settled comfortably into living rooms and bedrooms across Britain, a quiet revolution was beginning, one that no one fully anticipated. While many people bought the computer for games or simple educational tools, something far more transformative emerged from the machine's unassuming presence. It became a small creative workshop, humble in appearance, yet capable of sparking the imaginations of thousands of young programmers. In bedrooms with patterned wallpaper, beneath loft beds, or tucked into the corners of study desks, the Spectrum sat patiently. Its blinking cursor seemed to encourage exploration. Children and teenagers, some still in their school uniforms, would come home, turn on the television, and type a few tentative lines of basic code. Sometimes nothing happened. Sometimes everything happened. Sometimes the screen filled with colorful chaos, which was amusing enough to try again. Did you know, the Spectrum's built-in basic interpreter was designed so that even beginners could write functioning programs within minutes of turning on the machine? Magazines quickly recognized this growing interest. Titles such as Sinclair User, Your Sinclair, and Crash began dedicating entire pages to code listings, long columns of numbers, letters, and symbols that readers could type in manually, line by line. The process was deliberate and slow, requiring concentration, patience, and a quiet kind of determination that suited the relaxed pace of the Spectrum era. Parents occasionally glanced at these magazines, wondering why their children were copying hundreds of lines of text into a machine. But the children knew. At the end of the long session, perhaps after 2 or 3 attempts, the program would run, a small animation, a simple game, or a utility that printed shapes across the screen. Did you know, many future professional game developers wrote their very first programs by typing out code listings from Spectrum magazines? Local computer shops also became gentle social hubs. People would gather around display models, softly tapping the rubber keys, examining game tapes, or chatting quietly about the best way to optimize basic loops. Shop owners often left a Spectrum running near the counter, showing demos or simple games, creating an inviting space for beginners to try the keyboard for themselves. Did you know, some shops allowed customers to save their typed programs onto blank cassettes right there in the store, effectively letting people build tiny software collections before they even owned many games? It wasn't long before young programmers began writing their own software entirely from scratch. They would sit for hours, experimenting with ways to move a pixel across the screen, or to make a beep sound at just the right pitch. Many discovered the joy of loops, conditional statements, and variables. Concepts that were complex in theory but strangely intuitive when paired with patient trial and error on a television screen. Did you know, the Spectrum's simple sound system encouraged inventive coding techniques, leading some teenagers to create elaborate musical sequences using nothing but timed pulses from the tiny beeper? For many, this period felt peaceful. There were no notifications, no internet distractions, no instant downloads. Just the programmer, the computer, and the gentle glow of a CRT television humming quietly in the background. Programming on the Spectrum felt like building something from raw materials, where each line of code was a brick placed carefully into a larger structure. Some of these young coders found themselves developing games, small at first, then gradually more ambitious. Bedroom windows glowed late into the night as they tested sprites, tinkered with collision detection, and tried to overcome the Spectrum's memory limits with creativity rather than power. A handful of these teenagers sent their creations to software companies, often receiving polite letters in return. Did you know, several of the United Kingdom's most influential software companies began as small groups of teenagers coding in their bedrooms on the Spectrum? The idea of a bedroom coder soon became a hallmark of the era. These were not large teams with office spaces but individuals or small groups working entirely from home, often on school nights or weekends. Many of the games produced this way eventually became commercial releases, sold in high street shops alongside those from professional studios. Did you know, some Spectrum games created by bedroom coders sold tens of thousands of copies, earning more money than many adults made in a year? And still, the learning continued. Every coding session, successful or frustrating, contributed to what would later become a broad, national familiarity with computing. A generation that grew up with the Spectrum learned how to think logically, how to solve problems, and how to approach technology with curiosity rather than fear. But perhaps the most significant impact was something quieter. The realization that computers were not distant, mysterious machines controlled only by experts. They were tools, flexible, welcoming, and responsive to the imagination of anyone who touched the keyboard. By the mid-1980s, thousands of teenagers across Britain were writing their own software, forming the earliest foundations of what would become a world-leading game development culture. And in bedrooms all over the country, as programs loaded slowly from cassette tapes, the Spectrum continued blinking patiently, encouraging another line of code, another experiment, another burst of creativity from someone discovering their abilities for the very first time. The revolution was gentle, quiet, and deeply personal. And it was only just beginning. Chapter 4. The Golden Age of Spectrum Gaming. By the mid-1980s, something quietly remarkable was happening in homes, schools, and computer shops. The Sinclair Spectrum, with its soft rubber keys and cheerful colors, had become more than a machine. It had become a thriving ecosystem of games, creativity, and imagination. Across the United Kingdom, small software houses began to form, each one hoping to produce the next title that would capture the attention of eager players waiting patiently by their cassette recorders. In many living rooms, shelves began filling with rows of slim cassette cases, each decorated with colorful artwork depicting spaceships, cartoon characters, racing cars, fantasy worlds, or simply abstract shapes hinting at puzzles yet to be solved. The ritual was familiar: choose the tape, load it, listen to the data tones, wait, and then finally, after a few minutes of anticipation, the title screen would appear. Did you know, most Spectrum game covers were painted or illustrated by hand, giving the games a distinctive look that made browsing them in shops feel like browsing miniature pieces of art? The games themselves varied enormously in theme and style. There were platformers where small pixel characters leapt across floating platforms. There were arcades styled after popular machines found in seaside amusements. There were text adventures that unfolded one sentence at a time, encouraging players to imagine entire worlds from just a few lines of description. Some companies quickly gained reputations for quality. Ultimate Play the Game, a small studio based in the Midlands, astonished players with titles that stretched the Spectrum's capabilities far beyond what many believed possible. Games like Jetpack, PSSST, and Night Lore pushed graphical and technical boundaries, creating experiences that felt rich and polished despite the computer's limitations. Did you know? Night Lore introduced an isometric 3D engine that influenced game design across the entire industry, and many players mistook its visual depth for hardware that the Spectrum didn't actually possess. Other studios, such as Ocean and Imagine, developed games that offered a different kind of excitement. Their titles often came with licensed themes, familiar characters, or movie tie-ins, making them instantly appealing to children browsing game shops on Saturday mornings. For many young gamers, seeing a recognizable film or TV property on a Spectrum tape felt like bringing a piece of popular culture into their bedroom. Did you know? Ocean Software grew so rapidly during the Spectrum era that it became one of Europe's largest game publishers, releasing dozens of titles every year. As the popularity of Spectrum games grew, magazines became central to the gaming community. Review sections rated new releases, offering gentle commentary about graphics, sound, and playability. The reviews often included screenshots, grainy but exciting, along with playful descriptions that gave each game a personality. Children would read these reviews again and again, often long before they ever managed to play the games themselves. Did you know, some Spectrum magazines included entire free games printed as code listings, allowing readers to type them in manually or save them to tape? The affordability of the Spectrum created a particularly interesting trend: budget games. These were low-cost titles, often priced at £1.99 or £2.99, that offered simple entertainment without the expectation of high-end production. Children could buy them with pocket money, making gaming more accessible than ever before. Did you know, the budget gaming market became so successful that several companies, including Mastertronic, built their entire business model around low-cost Spectrum games? Because memory was limited, developers had to be inventive. Animations were often created from just a handful of frames. Sound effects were built from single tones rather than complex audio samples. Level designs used repeating patterns or clever illusions to give the impression of depth and variety. And yet, these restrictions were part of the charm. Players didn't mind the simplicity. In fact, many embraced it. What mattered most wasn't technical sophistication, but the feeling of interacting with a world that unfolded from lines of code and blocks of color on a household television. Did you know? Spectrum developers sometimes hid secret features or extra lives within the code, tucked away as little bonuses for curious players or for fun during long development nights. While some games were remembered for their technical innovations, others were remembered for their humor. Titles like Manic Miner and Jet Set Willy introduced bizarre enemies, whimsical level names, and odd moments of surreal charm that made older players smile and younger players laugh. These games felt cheerful and quirky, adding to the Spectrum's identity as a platform that welcomed creativity of all kinds. By the height of the Spectrum boom, the machine had become the cornerstone of the UK's growing software industry. Small teams worked from spare rooms, dining tables, or modest offices, assembling games that might later appear on store shelves next to professionally packaged titles. Every new release had the potential to become a surprise hit. And so, as the tapes loaded and the pixels danced across screens, Britain entered its golden age of home computing. It was an age defined not by cutting-edge hardware, but by imagination, bright, colorful, and quietly revolutionary. And the Spectrum, with its humble design and gentle beeps, sat at the center of it all, helping shape a generation of gamers, creators, and dreamers. Chapter 5. Hardware Quirks and Charming Limitations. As the Spectrum's popularity grew, people began to notice its quirks, those small technical limitations that, over time, became endearing parts of its personality. These quirks were not flaws in the minds of its users but familiar companions, like the creaking stair in an old house or the gentle hum of an aging refrigerator. They gave the machine character, and for many, they made the Spectrum feel like something alive, predictable in some ways, surprising in others. One of the most recognizable quirks was the machine's handling of color. The Spectrum could display bright, cheerful graphics, but its memory design meant that color information was stored in a simplified way. Each block of text or graphics, small squares across the screen, could hold only one foreground and one background color. When sprites or characters moved across these boundaries, colors sometimes changed unexpectedly, creating flickers or patches of misplaced brightness. Did you know, users affectionately called this effect attribute clash, and developers often designed characters with solid colors to avoid sudden patches of yellow, blue, or red appearing around them. This attribute clash became one of the Spectrum's visual signatures. In some cases, artists embraced it, using bold outlines and careful positioning to reduce the effect. In other cases, the color shifts contributed to a strange charm that modern players still recognize instantly. Alongside the color quirks was the Spectrum's approach to sound. Rather than having a dedicated audio chip, the machine relied on a small internal beeper capable of producing only one tone at a time. No harmonies, no polyphonic layers, just single notes that had to be switched rapidly to create the illusion of melody. And yet, some programmers discovered ways to make the beeper chirp, trill, and pulse in ways that felt surprisingly musical. Did you know, clever coders learned to manipulate the beeper at high speed to simulate chords or percussion, even though the hardware technically supported only one-note sound? Of course, the Spectrum's most talked about feature remained the rubber keyboard. Some people loved its softness, others found it imprecise. But there was something undeniably comforting about the gentle give of the keys beneath the fingers, especially during long programming sessions. The keys, though small, invited experimentation. Pressing one felt safe, unlikely to damage anything, and reassuringly quiet. Did you know, the keyboard was constructed using a membrane layer that pressed against printed circuits, making it one of the earliest widespread uses of membrane technology in home computing? The power supply also developed a reputation of its own. A small black brick plugged into the Spectrum's rear socket, growing pleasantly warm during use. Sometimes, users found that if they nudged it slightly, the machine might reset or flicker. This was not ideal, of course, but it became a known rule of Spectrum ownership. Treat the power supply gently and avoid pulling at the cable too energetically. Did you know, many Spectrum owners became accidentally skilled at diagnosing wobbly connections because the power supply's weight could cause slight loosening over time? Another aspect users noticed was the Spectrum's approach to heat. Inside the machine, certain chips ran warmer than others. During long gaming sessions, especially in summer, owners sometimes joked that the Spectrum doubled as a tiny heater. The warmth never became dangerous, but it was noticeable enough that some computer desks developed small marks or glossy patches from extended use. Did you know, some players placed thin coasters or bits of cardboard under their Spectrums to prevent the desk surface from warming or fading under the heat? Then there was the tape loading system, which, for all its quirks, remained central to the Spectrum experience. Loading a game could take several minutes, and interruptions were not uncommon. A tape recorded slightly too quietly or too loudly might fail. A child bumping the recorder might corrupt the data. Yet the ritual of loading became cherished precisely because of its slowness. The slow build-up, the anticipation, the gradual appearance of loading screens one stripe at a time. Did you know, some games displayed beautifully drawn loading screens that were shown only during the tape transfer process and disappeared immediately once the game started? Because of these quirks, developers grew resourceful. They found ways to optimize graphics to avoid color flicker. They compressed data so more could fit into memory. They used creative coding to simulate sound effects far beyond what the beeper should have been capable of. Some even rewrote the way the machine refreshed the screen to squeeze out a little extra performance. Did you know, certain games used custom loaders, specialized routines encoded onto tape that sped up loading or displayed animations while transferring data? And so, the Spectrum's limitations became part of its identity. They shaped the games made for it, influenced the art styles, and encouraged programmers to think cleverly rather than rely on brute force computing power. The quirks also made every Spectrum game feel handcrafted, as if each one was a small engineering puzzle solved by someone working in a bedroom, a shop back room, or a tiny studio. The computer's charm grew directly from these imperfections. People did not love the Spectrum because it was flawless. They loved it because it had personality, warmth, and a certain stubbornness that made every victory, every game loaded correctly, every line of code executed without error, feel slightly more rewarding. The limitations were not obstacles. They were the beginning of a conversation between the user and the machine. And as players continued exploring, coding, and loading games, the Spectrum sat quietly on desks across the country, humming with warmth and gently glowing with color. Its quirks were familiar, its behavior predictable in its unpredictability, and its presence comforting. It was a machine that didn't just work, it invited patience, curiosity, and a calm engagement with technology that feels almost meditative today. The Spectrum's charm, it seemed, lay in being beautifully imperfect. Chapter 6. The Spectrum 128K and later machines. As the years passed and the Spectrum continued humming contentedly in bedrooms across Britain, Sinclair Research began to imagine what the next version of their beloved machine might look like. By the mid-1980s, expectations were growing. Games were becoming more ambitious, developers were pushing the limits of memory, and users were beginning to wonder whether the little 48K model could continue keeping up with their curiosity. Inside Sinclair's design offices, discussions unfolded slowly over cups of tea and sheets of graph paper. The team understood that people loved the Spectrum's simplicity, but they also recognized that more memory, richer sound, and a sturdier keyboard could help the computer evolve without losing its charm. It was a delicate balance, changing enough to make a difference, yet not so much that the machine lost the personality people had grown attached to. And so, after months of quiet development, the Spectrum 128K emerged. It looked familiar but slightly more refined, like a distant cousin who had dressed up for an important occasion. The most noticeable difference was its sleek, straight-edged case with full-sized keys instead of rubber ones, a keyboard that clicked more crisply under the fingertips, offering a sense of precision that many users welcomed. Did you know, the Spectrum 128K keyboard was designed to feel closer to a typewriter, because users had begun writing longer programs and wanted a firmer, more confident typing experience? Inside the machine, the improvements were even more significant. The Spectrum now had 128 kilobytes of memory, offering programmers space they could only dream of in the earlier models. Games could include larger maps, more complex animations, and longer musical sequences. It felt as though the computer had taken a deep, refreshed breath and discovered new room to stretch. Did you know, the decision to create a 128K Spectrum was heavily influenced by demand in Spain, where Sinclair's partner company wanted a more powerful model for their flourishing computer market. The new machine also included an AY3-8912 sound chip, capable of generating 3-channel audio. 4 Spectrum owners used to the gentle chirps and beeps of the original beeper. The new sound was nothing short of astonishing. Suddenly music felt fuller and more melodic. Game soundtracks could feature harmonies, rhythmic bass lines, and cheerful jingles that filled rooms with unexpected warmth. Did you know, musicians began composing full pieces specifically for the 128K SAY sound chip, treating it almost like a miniature synthesizer? A curious feature of the Spectrum 128K was its built-in menu system, displayed on startup. Rather than dropping the user straight into BASIC, the machine showed a calm red menu offering options to load a program, enter the BASIC editor, or adjust settings. It made the computer feel slightly more formal and structured, as though it now greeted users politely before allowing them to explore. Did you know, the Spectrum 128K's startup menu was designed to help new users navigate the machine without needing to memorize commands? Memory banks were introduced too, sections of RAM that programmers could activate or deactivate depending on what their games required. This allowed them to create scrolling worlds, animated cutscenes, and complex logic that would never have fit inside the earlier machines. Did you know, memory banking was one of the techniques that allowed later Spectrum games to feel dramatically more advanced than early titles, even though the underlying processor stayed the same? Not long after the 128K's introduction, Sinclair released the Spectrum Plus, a transitional model that kept the original internals but adopted the more professional-looking keyboard and case. This was intended for users who loved the simplicity of the 48K machine but wanted a better typing experience. It looked grown-up, tidy, and more in line with the evolving idea of what a home computer should resemble. Did you know, the Spectrum Plus design laid the foundation for later machines, influencing even the models released after Sinclair Research changed ownership? As the market continued shifting, pressure from competitors increased. Other companies were releasing machines with built-in disk drives, higher resolution graphics, and larger sound capabilities. Consumers were becoming more aware of these differences, and Sinclair Research found itself in a challenging position. They wanted to innovate, but each new feature increased costs, and affordability had always been part of the Spectrum's identity. During this period, development never truly stopped. Engineers considered ways to expand storage, improve video output, and support more advanced peripherals. Some ideas were explored in prototypes, others remained sketches on drafting paper. Sinclair's vision stayed the same, a computer that empowered creativity, learning, and entertainment without the barrier of high cost. Did you know, several unreleased Spectrum prototypes existed, including models with built-in disk drives and enhanced graphics, though most never reached production? The later Spectrum models, especially the 128K variants, demonstrated a gentle evolution rather than a dramatic leap. They preserved the underlying architecture that users knew so well, the familiar Z80 processor, the basic environment, and the characteristic display system. But everything felt a little smoother, a little more capable, as though the machine had matured quietly along with the people who used it. And so, in living rooms across Britain, the Spectrum 128K found its place beside its older siblings. Its deeper sound, expanded memory, and improved keyboard helped usher in a new wave of games and creativity, bridging the gap between the machine's humble beginnings and its growing ambitions. Despite all the changes, it remained unmistakably a Spectrum. Gentle, colorful, modest, and endlessly inspiring. A machine that grew, not loudly, but patiently, alongside the generation it helped introduce to the digital world. Chapter 7. Accessories and Add-ons. As the Spectrum continued to sit proudly beneath televisions across the country, users soon discovered that the small computer could grow and evolve through a wide range of accessories. Some were designed by Sinclair Research, while others came from enthusiastic third-party companies experimenting in workshops and spare rooms. Each accessory added a new possibility, extending the Spectrum's usefulness in ways that ranged from practical to imaginative, and sometimes to the decidedly unusual. One of the most well-known expansions was the Interface 1. This slim unit attached to the back of the Spectrum, adding new ports and features that felt remarkably advanced for such a small device. With it, users could connect string-like networks of computers together, save programs at high speed, and even attach special storage cartridges called microdrives. Did you know, the Interface 1 allowed multiple Spectrums to be connected in a local network, long before home networking became a common concept? The accompanying microdrives were among the most fascinating and eccentric accessories of the era. These tiny cartridges, no bigger than a matchbox, held a thin magnetic tape loop that spun rapidly when in use. Programs could load far faster than from standard cassette tapes, making them feel futuristic and efficient. Their distinctive whirring sound became familiar in households fortunate enough to own them. Did you know? Microdrive cartridges could sometimes stretch or warp over time due to their speed, leading to charmingly unpredictable behavior that users came to accept as part of their personality. Another notable accessory was the Spectrum printer, often remembered for its unusual output. Rather than printing with ink, it used a special silver paper coated with a heat-sensitive material. When the printer activated, tiny heated pins pressed against the paper, leaving behind darkened text and graphics. The gentle, whispering motion of the paper feeding through the machine made printing feel almost serene. Did you know, the printer's silver paper would gradually fade if exposed to sunlight, leading many users to store their printed programs inside books or drawers to preserve them. Then came the joystick interfaces, which brought new life to the growing library of action games. Since the original Spectrum lacked dedicated joystick ports, external interfaces became essential. Some plugged into the rear expansion slot, while others attached through the keyboard matrix, translating joystick movements into key presses. They allowed players to enjoy smoother control, especially in fast-paced titles. Did you know, the Kempston interface became one of the most widely supported joystick standards on the Spectrum, even though it was created by a third-party company rather than Sinclair? Light guns also arrived, a surprising but memorable addition. These colorful plastic peripherals allowed players to aim at the television screen and trigger reactions within compatible games. Although limited in accuracy, the experience was novel and exciting, especially for younger players fascinated by the idea of interacting with the TV in real time. Did you know, many Spectrum light guns work by detecting the moment a bright area of the screen was scanned, a technique borrowed from early arcade systems? As the Spectrum community grew, so did the desire for memory expansions. Some early users wished their 16K model could behave more like a 48K one, and so plug-in RAM packs appeared. These devices clipped onto the back of the machine, offering additional memory, but sometimes with an unfortunate tendency to wobble. A slight nudge could cause the computer to crash, leading to the affectionate nickname RAM pack wobble. Did you know, many users secured their RAM packs with rubber bands, tape, or small boxes placed behind the Spectrum to prevent accidental movement? Storage solutions continued to expand. Cassette decks designed specifically for computers began appearing, featuring tone controls optimized for loading software. These sturdy recorders were popular among users who preferred reliability over the charm and occasional frustration of household tape players. Did you know, some dedicated computer tape decks included automatic volume stabilizers, ensuring consistent audio levels to reduce loading errors? Beyond the practical accessories, a wide range of more unusual expansions emerged. There were speech synthesizers that allowed the Spectrum to speak in robotic voices. There were drawing tablets that let users sketch simple graphics on the screen. There were even music keyboards that transformed the Spectrum into a miniature workstation, enabling users to compose melodies using the machine's limited but expressive sound capabilities. Did you know, one music add-on allowed notes to be played live, with the Spectrum recording them in real time so users could create their own digital compositions? Printers, modems, and disk systems from third-party manufacturers expanded the machine's professional applications. Teachers used the Spectrum for classroom exercises, hobbyists used it for writing letters or cataloging collections, and aspiring programmers used it to assemble increasingly complex projects. Every new accessory broadened the Spectrum's role, tiny, inexpensive, but endlessly adaptable. And through all these expansions, one thing remained constant: the gentle spirit of experimentation. The Spectrum invited curiosity. Each new add-on felt like opening a small door into a wider world of possibilities. Users learned through trial and exploration, discovering that technology was not rigid or intimidating, but flexible and approachable. As people added microdrives, printers, joysticks, speech units, and memory packs to their machines, the Spectrum became more than a computer. It became a modular companion, growing, adjusting, and transforming alongside its owners. And in bedrooms and studies everywhere, the little black machine continued its quiet work, blink by blink, expansion by expansion, enriching the world of home computing in ways that were gentle but profound. Chapter 8. Clones and the international spread of the Spectrum. As the Sinclair Spectrum continued its quiet rise across the United Kingdom, its influence began reaching far beyond British shores. What started as a modest home computer designed in Cambridge gradually found its way into classrooms, living rooms, and workshops across the world. Some countries welcomed the Spectrum exactly as it was, while others adapted, recreated, or even reinvented it in ways that gave the machine entirely new identities. In Spain, for example, the Spectrum became especially beloved. The warm climate, vibrant culture, and bustling technology market created an atmosphere where home computers were embraced with enthusiasm. Retail shops stocked software, magazines published comic-style covers, and developers built titles tailored specifically to Spanish audiences. The Spectrum's popularity grew so much that many later models, including the 128K version, were designed with Spanish input and tested extensively in Spanish factories. Did you know, the Spectrum 128K was first launched in Spain months before it appeared in the United Kingdom, making Spain the proving ground for several of its new features? Across the Atlantic, the Spectrum took on a new form under the guidance of Timex Corporation. These machines, known as Timex Sinclair computers, carried a mix of Sinclair engineering and Timex manufacturing design. They were marketed primarily in the United States and Portugal and looked slightly different: smoother casings, altered keyboards, and updated display capabilities. Some models added higher resolution graphics modes, offering a glimpse of what the original Spectrum might have evolved into. Did you know? Timex's American versions occasionally supported hardware modes that were more advanced than the UK Spectrum, but many of those enhancements went largely unused due to limited software support. In Eastern Europe, the Spectrum experienced an entirely different journey. During the 1980s, computer imports were restricted or difficult to obtain in many countries, yet the architecture of the Spectrum, simple, elegant, and well-documented, made it ideal for replication. Engineers and hobbyists studied the circuitry carefully and produced local versions, sometimes as official educational tools, other times as informal community projects passed from workshop to workshop. Did you know, dozens of unofficial Spectrum clones appeared across the former USSR, Poland, and the Czech region, each with its own slight variations in design, memory layout, or keyboard style. Many of these Eastern European clones became central to childhood experiences. In small apartments and communal buildings, children learned programming on machines that resembled the Spectrum but had names such as Didactic, Pentagon, Scorpion, or Elro. Although these systems sometimes suffered from compatibility quirks, their influence was enormous, giving entire generations their first exposure to coding, gaming, and digital creativity. In Brazil, the Spectrum also gained a distinctive identity. Import restrictions meant that local companies built their own versions, often in bright casings with expanded features. Some Brazilian Spectrum clone models added joystick ports, improved video output, or sturdier keyboards. Local magazines published tutorials in Portuguese, guiding new users through the quirks of coding on these uniquely Brazilian systems. Did you know? Brazil's vibrant Spectrum community persisted long after the original UK production had ended, making it one of the longest-lasting Spectrum markets in the world? The Spectrum's journey across borders wasn't always smooth. Different television standards, power requirements, and component availability meant that engineers often needed to redesign internal circuitry. Yet, through all these variations, the heart of the machine, the Z80 processor, the memory structure, and the joyful sense of possibility remained present. In countries where official Spectrums were scarce, communities formed around user clubs and informal groups. People shared photocopied manuals, handwritten programming notes, and cassette tapes passed from friend to friend. A copied game or utility might travel through dozens of homes, gently warping in its audio fidelity with each re-recording but still functioning well enough to inspire someone new. Did you know, in some regions, cassette tapes were duplicated so frequently that loading tones became distorted, leading users to adjust recording volumes and fine-tune tape heads as a normal part of home computing? The creativity that emerged from these global adaptations was remarkable. Developers in Eastern Europe wrote games that showcased incredible technical skill, using tricks and optimizations discovered independently of the UK community. Spanish developers produced titles filled with expressive artwork and smooth animation. Brazilian teams experimented with colorful graphical styles that differed noticeably from their European counterparts. Each region brought its own cultural flavor to the Spectrum experience. Did you know, some Spectrum clones supported multiple video modes simultaneously, allowing developers to create hybrid graphical styles not possible on the original UK hardware? Despite the wide variety of clones and adaptations, something gentle and unifying persisted. The philosophy that computing should be accessible, affordable, and open to experimentation. The Spectrum, and all its international descendants, encouraged users to explore, learn, and create in their own way. Whether it was a child typing in a basic program from a Spanish magazine, a teenager in Poland recording a game onto a cassette for a friend, or a hobbyist in Brazil adjusting the tuning on a home television, the spirit of the Spectrum traveled quietly with them. It crossed oceans not through corporate strategy but through the curiosity, enthusiasm, and creativity of everyday people. And as the machine spread into new countries, each adopting and reshaping it, the Spectrum's legacy deepened, an unassuming little computer connecting millions of minds across the globe. Chapter 9. The Spectrum's Cultural Impact. As the years passed and the Spectrum continued blinking patiently in bedrooms, living rooms, and classrooms, something subtle but profound began taking shape. It wasn't just about the games people played or the programs they wrote. It was the cultural footprint left by this small, unassuming computer, a footprint that spread through British life and beyond with a kind of quiet persistence. In homes, the Spectrum became a familiar companion. Parents might hear the distinctive loading tones drifting from a child's room, followed by soft beeps and bursts of color. Siblings gathered around the television, negotiating turns or watching someone attempt the same difficult level yet again. The Spectrum created shared experiences, small, everyday moments that lingered in memory long after the machine's hardware had aged. Did you know, some families kept detailed notebooks filled with handwritten cheat codes, level maps, and loading instructions, treating their Spectrums almost like family projects? Schools also began adopting the Spectrum. Teachers, many of whom had never used computers before, learned alongside their students. Classrooms filled with the glow of televisions perched on metal trolleys, while children typed simple commands to draw shapes, count numbers, or animate small characters across the screen. For many students, these were their first steps into computing, a subject that would later shape entire careers. Did you know, educational authorities in parts of the UK purchased Spectrums in bulk because they were inexpensive and easy for schools to maintain? The machine's cultural reach extended into publishing as well. Magazines devoted to the Spectrum became monthly rituals for readers. Issues arrived wrapped in glossy covers, often accompanied by demo tapes, coding tutorials, reviews, and letters from passionate fans. People read them slowly, sometimes from front to back, and then returned to their favorite pages later, studying screenshots or tip sections with quiet excitement. Did you know, some Spectrum magazines received more reader letters per month than mainstream newspapers, reflecting the strong community spirit of the home computing era? The Spectrum also reshaped the British entertainment landscape. Game developers, many working from bedrooms or modest offices, began to gain recognition. Their names appeared in magazine interviews, on tape inlays, and occasionally on television. They became small-scale celebrities, admired not for glamour or fame but for their creativity and cleverness. These individuals represented a new kind of cultural figure, the homegrown digital creator. Did you know, many of the UK's later film, television, and visual effects pioneers first discovered digital graphics through tinkering on Spectrum machines? In city centers, computer shops became key cultural spaces. Visitors browsed shelves slowly, examining cassette cases with brightly colored covers. Some shops allowed customers to try games on display models, where it was common to find groups of teenagers watching someone play while chatting about cheats or hidden levels. These quiet gatherings helped form bonds and friendships, held together by a shared interest in simple pixelated worlds. Did you know, some independent shops held informal competitions where customers tried to achieve the highest score on certain Spectrum games displayed in store windows? Television shows also took notice. Programs dedicated to computing, gaming, and technology featured the Spectrum regularly. Hosts demonstrated new games, discussed software trends, or taught simple programming techniques on air. These shows often moved at a gentle pace, reflecting the slow, methodical feel of the computing world at the time. Did you know, early tech-focused TV shows sometimes used Spectrum graphics in their opening titles because of the machine's distinct pixel style? Beyond entertainment and education, the Spectrum's cultural influence extended into the workplace as well. People who practiced programming at home often found themselves gaining confidence with office computers, long before formal training courses became widespread. A generation grew comfortable typing commands, troubleshooting problems, and understanding how software behaved, all thanks to the small black machine they had grown up with. Did you know, early job applications in computing often asked whether applicants had experience with home computers like the Spectrum, because employers recognized how much practical knowledge users gained from them? Community groups formed, too. Clubs met in local halls or libraries, where people exchanged cassette tapes, discussed programming challenges, or showcased homemade games. These gatherings were quiet, friendly, and collaborative, mirroring the peaceful, curious tone of the era. For some, these clubs provided the first sense of belonging in a technical community. Did you know, some of the first organized gaming tournaments in Britain involved Spectrum computers, long before competitive gaming became mainstream? As the Spectrum continued influencing so many aspects of life, it did so without fanfare. It was never loud, never boastful, never demanding. It simply became part of the cultural fabric, woven into memories, shaping attitudes toward technology, and encouraging a gentle sense of curiosity in everyone who used it. Its impact wasn't explosive. It was steady, persistent, and deeply human. And in this cultural ripple, spreading across classrooms, magazines, living rooms, workplaces, and community halls, the Spectrum quietly helped shape an entire generation's relationship with technology. It became not merely a computer, but a cultural companion. Chapter 10. The Business Story of Sinclair Research. While the Spectrum blossomed in homes, bedrooms, schools, and shops, there was another, quieter story unfolding behind the scenes, one taking place in boardrooms, warehouses, and manufacturing facilities. This was the business story of Sinclair Research, a tale marked by ambition, pressure, innovation, and the slow, steady challenges that accompany rapid success. In the early 1980s, Sinclair Research was a modest company with ambitious dreams. Its staff worked from a mixture of offices and converted buildings in Cambridge, the walls often lined with prototypes, circuit boards, and sketches taped carefully to pinboards. The atmosphere was one of possibility, a team determined to bring affordable computing to the masses, even if the larger industry considered such goals unrealistic. Did you know? Sinclair Research operated with remarkably small teams, relying on compact design groups who worked intensely on each new product? As the Spectrum's sales climbed, Sinclair Research found itself propelled into the spotlight far faster than expected. Orders poured in. Shops placed requests for more units than the company could immediately manufacture. Production partners raced to increase output, while Sinclair's small internal team worked tirelessly to keep pace with demand. But success brought challenges. Every component, from the rubber keyboard to the power supply, had to be sourced, assembled, and tested with care. A single delayed shipment could slow the entire process. Factories occasionally struggled to keep up, and customer waiting lists grew longer during periods of high demand. Did you know, some early customers waited weeks or even months for their Spectrum to arrive, leading to stories of eagerly refreshing the post each morning? Marketing, too, became a central focus. Sinclair Research had a distinctive advertising style, simple, bold, and often very direct. Magazine adverts displayed the machine clearly, surrounded by lists of features and prices that undercut competitors dramatically. Where other companies emphasized power, Sinclair emphasized affordability and accessibility. Did you know? Sinclair's marketing strategy deliberately used minimalistic imagery because focus groups responded well to the clean, uncluttered presentation. The competition, however, was fierce. Machines such as the Commodore 64 and the BBC Micro were gaining ground, each offering different strengths, some with better sound, others with sturdier keyboards or more memory. Sinclair Research faced the delicate task of keeping prices low while still innovating at a steady pace. Money flowed in quickly from Spectrum sales, but it flowed out just as quickly into research, manufacturing, and new projects. Among these projects was the Sinclair QL, a machine aimed at the business market. It was more powerful than the Spectrum, featuring advanced technology that Sinclair hoped would appeal to professionals and small companies. Did you know, the Sinclair QL launched before it was fully ready, leading to technical issues that impacted public perception and strained company resources? Another major project was the C5 electric vehicle, a personal transport concept that captured public imagination but struggled commercially. Sir Clive Sinclair believed passionately in the future of electric vehicles, but the timing, design, and marketing challenges proved difficult for the company to manage alongside its computing ventures. Did you know? Sinclair invested heavily in the C5 project, hoping it would spark a transportation revolution, but the investment placed financial pressure on the company during a crucial period. Meanwhile, the home computing market was evolving rapidly. Costs were rising. Customers were beginning to expect more powerful systems with built-in storage or advanced graphics. Competitors updated their machines frequently, each update placing new expectations on Sinclair Research. Inside the company, discussions about strategy became increasingly significant. Some team members pushed for more advanced hardware updates. Others believed that maintaining affordability and simplicity should remain the priority. Balancing innovation with cost restraints grew more difficult with each passing year. Did you know? Sinclair's business philosophy prioritized low-cost design so strongly that many internal proposals for advanced features were declined because they would have increased retail prices. Manufacturing, too, presented challenges. Factories in the UK and abroad worked long hours producing circuit boards, membranes, casings, and power supplies, but small variances in production occasionally caused reliability issues. Customer service teams worked steadily to reassure new owners, replace faulty parts, or assist with setup concerns. As the mid-1980s progressed, the financial pressures intensified. Although the Spectrum remained beloved and continued to sell, the market was shifting toward more advanced home computers that offered features the original Spectrum architecture struggled to match. And so, despite the machine's enormous cultural impact, Sinclair Research began facing difficulties that could not be resolved with creativity alone. In time, these challenges led to one of the most significant moments in the company's history: discussions with potential buyers. The Spectrum had achieved remarkable success, but sustaining that success required stability, manufacturing strength, and investment on a larger scale. Did you know? Sir Clive Sinclair considered multiple partnership options before entering serious negotiations with a company that would eventually change the Spectrum's future permanently. And so, as Sinclair Research continued working behind the scenes, the story moved steadily toward a pivotal chapter, one where the company would pass its iconic computer into new hands. But before that transition took place, the Spectrum remained what it had always been: a small, affordable machine built on belief, vision, and the quiet determination of a company that changed computing history not with power, but with accessibility. Chapter 11: The Amstrad Takeover and the Final Years. As the mid-1980s unfolded, Sinclair Research found itself facing a complex mixture of success and struggle. The Spectrum remained a beloved home computer, but financial pressures mounted from ambitious side projects and intensifying competition. The rapid growth of the home computing market, once an advantage, had now become a race that required more resources, more manufacturing strength, and more stability than Sinclair Research could comfortably sustain. It was during this period of uncertainty that Amstrad, a rising force in consumer electronics, entered the picture. Known for affordable, integrated products, particularly their all-in-one word processors and stereo systems, Amstrad had the manufacturing scale and distribution networks that Sinclair Research lacked. A partnership, or even an acquisition, began to seem like a practical path toward securing the Spectrum's long-term future. Did you know, discussions between Sinclair and Amstrad progressed quietly at first, with many employees learning of the negotiations only shortly before they were finalized? In 1986, the announcement came. Amstrad had purchased the rights to the Sinclair computer range, including the Spectrum name and technology. For some, the news felt surprising. For others, it felt inevitable. Sir Clive Sinclair, always focused on innovation, shifted his attention to new ideas, while Amstrad prepared to guide the Spectrum into its next chapter. The transition brought changes, not abrupt or dramatic, but steady and practical. Amstrad, known for its cost-effective engineering, quickly set about redesigning aspects of the Spectrum to simplify manufacturing and reduce costs. Their philosophy emphasized integration, creating machines that were easier for families to set up straight out of the box. Did you know? Amstrad's designs often combined multiple components inside a single casing, reducing cable clutter and improving reliability. One of the first results of this philosophy was the Spectrum Plus 2, a sleek machine featuring a built-in cassette deck. No longer did users need a separate tape recorder with delicate volume settings. The integrated deck solved that problem with a tidy, practical design. The Plus 2 retained the familiar keyboard layout of the Spectrum 128, but its gray casing and streamlined shape marked a visual change, a subtle signal that a new era had begun. Did you know, the built-in cassette system of the Plus 2 drastically reduced loading failures, making it one of the most user-friendly Spectrum models ever produced? Following the Plus 2 came the Spectrum Plus 3, which replaced the cassette deck with a built-in 3-inch floppy disk drive. This new feature offered faster loading, higher reliability, and greater storage capacity. For many users, it felt like a leap into the future, though the niche format of the disks limited their availability compared to more common floppy standards. Did you know, The +3's disk system was originally designed for Amstrad CPC line and was adapted for the Spectrum as part of Amstrad's integrated manufacturing approach. Amstrad continued to support the Spectrum software market, ensuring that new games and applications remained compatible with the updated machines. Publishers adapted quickly, releasing tapes and discs that matched the new formats. For a time, the Spectrum enjoyed a renewed period of commercial life, buoyed by Amstrad's dependable production lines. Yet, despite this revitalization, the broader landscape was shifting. By the late 1980s, 16-bit computers such as the Amiga and Atari ST were capturing public attention, offering advanced graphics, multi-channel sound, and arcade-quality games. The Spectrum, with its modest architecture, struggled to compete directly with these machines. Did you know, even after 16-bit computers gained popularity, the Spectrum continued to outsell some competitors in the budget market due to its low price and extensive game library? Amstrad maintained the Spectrum range into the early 1990s, producing hardware, supporting software distribution, and ensuring compatibility across models. But gradually, demand declined. Shops began devoting more shelf space to consoles and higher-end computers. Developers shifted their focus to new platforms, and the once vibrant era of cassette-based home computing began to fade. Despite the market changes, the Spectrum never truly disappeared. Users continued playing its games, sharing cassettes, and writing small programs. Some enthusiasts kept their machines in regular use, long after newer technologies had taken center stage. Its warm hum and familiar keyboard became symbols of earlier days, simple, colorful, and full of discovery. Did you know? Amstrad officially ended Spectrum production in the early 1990s, but second-hand markets and hobbyist circles kept the machine alive for decades afterward. The final years of the Spectrum's commercial life were quiet, gentle, and unceremonious. There was no grand farewell, no final broadcast or major announcement. Instead, the machine simply slipped into the background, its role complete, its influence already deeply embedded in the culture it had helped shape. And even as newer systems appeared, offering dazzling graphics and digital sound, the Spectrum remained fondly remembered, a small machine with a big impact. It had weathered company transitions, market shifts, and technological leaps, all while retaining a charm that resonated far beyond its specifications. By the time its production ceased, the Spectrum had earned a place not just in computing history, but in the personal histories of millions. Its end was quiet, but its legacy endured, waiting patiently for the next chapter, the one written not by corporations, but by enthusiasts, communities, and fans around the world. Chapter 12. Legacy, Nostalgia, and the Spectrum's Lasting Influence. As the Spectrum's commercial life came to a quiet close, something unusual happened, something that few home computers of its era experienced. Instead of fading into obscurity, the Spectrum settled into a new kind of existence. It became a machine not just remembered, but cherished. A source of nostalgia, inspiration, and curiosity that carried on long after production stopped. In bedrooms, attics, and cupboards across the United Kingdom and beyond, Spectrums remained tucked away, waiting patiently inside old cardboard boxes. Many people, years later, opened those boxes and found the familiar black casing, the rainbow stripe, and the soft rubber keys worn smooth from hours of use. Switching on the machine again, perhaps after decades, brought back memories of childhood, long weekends, and the gentle whir of cassette tapes. Did you know, many people who rediscovered their Spectrums in the 1990s and 2000s found that the machine still worked perfectly, a testament to their simplicity and robust construction? As retro computing communities grew, so did the appreciation for the Spectrum's unique limitations. The color clash once seen as an annoyance became a beloved aesthetic. The beeper sounds, once considered crude, became instantly recognizable audio signatures. Games that once felt cutting-edge now carried the comforting charm of another era, simple, imaginative, and deeply human. Online communities began to form, People shared scanned manuals, digitized tapes, and memories of afternoons spent typing listings from magazines. Forums expanded into vast archives of knowledge, containing everything from repair guides to stories about childhood discoveries. Did you know, the Spectrum became one of the most emulated computers in history, with dozens of software emulators created across almost every platform? These emulators allowed new generations to experience Spectrum games, while older users could revisit their favorites with ease. From smartphones to laptops, the Spectrum found new homes in digital form, compact, accessible, and preserved. Alongside emulation came a remarkable wave of Spectrum game preservation. Volunteers painstakingly archived cassette tapes, sometimes cleaning the audio signals and correcting damage caused by age. In doing so, they saved games that might otherwise have been lost forever, an act of cultural preservation that reflected the deep affection many felt for the machine. Did you know, some preservationists built specialized tape-reading devices capable of capturing data more accurately than the original Spectrum hardware? But nostalgia was only part of the story. The Spectrum continued to inspire new creativity. Hobbyist developers began writing fresh games decades after the machine's heyday, exploring ideas that would have been impossible or unimaginable during its commercial life. These new titles, crafted lovingly by fans, often showcase techniques that pushed the hardware far beyond what earlier developers believed possible. Did you know, modern Spectrum homebrew games sometimes outperform commercial titles from the 1980s, thanks to improved understanding of the hardware and decades of accumulated programming knowledge? Hardware enthusiasts also rekindled interest in expansion devices. Modern versions of old accessories appeared: flash memory loaders, improved video output boards, new keyboards, and even RGB enhancements that preserved compatibility while offering cleaner images. The machine became a playground for engineers who enjoyed problem-solving at the smallest scales. And then, in the late 2010s, something extraordinary happened. A group of engineers, designers, and longtime fans developed a new, modern device inspired directly by the original Spectrum. The ZX Spectrum Next. This machine, funded through a massive wave of community support, reimagined the Spectrum using contemporary technology while retaining compatibility with classic software. Did you know, the Spectrum Next became one of the most successful retro computing crowdfunding projects ever launched, reflecting the enduring love for the original machine? The Next offered expanded graphics, enhanced sound, more memory, and modern connections, all wrapped in a casing that echoed the familiar design of the 1980s. It felt like a respectful continuation, rather than a replacement. A love letter to the past, written with the tools of the present. Beyond the hardware, the Spectrum's influence radiated across entire industries. Many of the people who grew up programming on those rubber keys went on to create modern video games, software applications, and digital tools. They carried with them the lessons learned from the Spectrum. How to think logically, how to solve problems, and how to experiment without fear. Did you know, several prominent technology leaders, game designers, and engineers have publicly attributed their career paths to the early experiences they had with the Spectrum? Even today, references to the Spectrum appear in documentaries, exhibitions, books, and retrospectives. Museums display its sleek casing, its loading screens, and its colorful games as artifacts of a pioneering era. Younger visitors examine it curiously, while older ones smile softly, remembering quiet evenings spent typing code or waiting for a favorite game to load. In meetups and retro conventions, people bring their Spectrums, often carefully cleaned and restored. They demonstrate their favorite games, share stories about the first time they saw press play on tape, or discuss the quirks of particular memory addressing schemes. The conversations are warm, nostalgic, and unhurried, much like the machine itself. Did you know, some retro events host fastest loader competitions, where enthusiasts compare optimized tape loading routines written decades apart? And so, the Spectrum's legacy extends far beyond the sum of its circuitry. It lives in memories, in communities, in shared experiences, and in the countless paths people have taken because of it. It lives in new hardware, new games, and modern reimaginings. It lives in the culture of curiosity it fostered and the gentle introduction to computing it provided. The Spectrum began as a humble home computer, compact, affordable, and unassuming. Yet it became something immeasurably larger. A spark that ignited creativity, shaped industries, and connected millions of people across generations. Even now, when someone switches on a Spectrum, real or emulated, and sees that familiar border of color, that blinking prompt, and those bright, simple pixels, they are touching a piece of history that continues to glow quietly in the digital age. The Spectrum never truly ended. It simply transformed into nostalgia, inspiration, and a legacy that hums gently onward, just like the little Mädchen that started it all. And now, as this quiet story comes to an end, thank you for listening, and for spending a little time here, where nothing much happens. And that's perfectly fine. If you'd like more slow, simple, uneventful stories to help you relax, or to drift off to sleep, you can subscribe to this channel, and new dull stories will arrive for you, at a gentle pace, whenever you need them. Thank you again, and may your night be calm, quiet, and wonderfully uneventful.